My parents used my college fund to spoil my sister while I worked myself to exhaustion, but I was the one being dramatic. Really? I left during the golden hour, not on purpose, it just happened that way. The sun was low, painting the street in burnt orange as I stuffed the last of my clothes into a gym bag. No goodbyes, no dramatic exit, just the quiet zip of a suitcase and the sound of my own heart trying to keep. Now I'm writing this from my grandpa's guest room, warm, quiet, safe. The contrast is jarring. Just last week, I was skipping meals to make rent. Today, I had pancakes and fresh strawberries for breakfast. The shift is surreal, and honestly, I'm still waiting for it all to fall apart. But let me rewind, because this isn't just about money, it's about trust. It's about how the people who are supposed to protect you can be the very ones who tear you down. My name is Lena. I'm 21, and what happened to me is more than just a misunderstanding. It was betrayal, layered, strategic, and intentional. Growing up, I didn't feel unloved. That's the hardest part to reconcile now. My parents weren't cold or cruel in the early days. They were warm and involved. Always front row at my piano recitals, always cheering the loudest at Bree's spelling bees. We took camping trips in the summer, made homemade pizzas on Fridays, and decorated the house together every December with the same old string lights and a shaky plastic star. We felt like a team, a family. I was the firstborn, and that came with both praise and pressure. My parents expected a lot from me, but they also gave me a lot of responsibility early. I helped with chores, watched Bree after school, and learned how to cook simple meals by the age of 10. It felt natural, like I was doing my part. When mom went back to school to become a CPA and dad took on a bigger role at his firm, I was the one making sure Bree got her homework done and didn't eat too much candy before dinner. I was the helper, the steady one. Bree adored me back then. She'd sneak into my bed when she had nightmares and sit in the bathroom while I got ready for school, just so we could talk. She was funny and bright, always dancing around the house like the floor was a stage. I never once resented taking care of her. I was proud of being her big sister. And my parents used to be proud of me too. Lena's got her head on straight, Dad would say. She's our rock. I believed them. I thought the sacrifices I made, turning down sleepovers to babysit, giving up a summer trip to stay home when money was tight, mattered. When it came time for college, I made the practical choice, community college nearby. I had dreams of studying food science or maybe opening a bakery one day like Grandpa Joe, but I knew money was tight. I didn't want to burden them. That's so thoughtful of you, Mom had said when I told her. You've always been the mature one. I was working part-time at a local cafe by then, early morning shifts before class and weekend hours when most kids were still sleeping in. I liked the work. It was honest and fast-paced, and I got to bring home leftover pastries, which Bree loved. It also gave me a sense of control, like I was contributing to my future, brick by brick. What I didn't know was that those bricks would be all I had to stand on. As Bree grew into her teens, the energy in our house shifted. Suddenly, she wasn't just the baby sister anymore. She was the star. Captain of the dance team, straight A's, glowing social media presence. Everywhere we went, people gushed about how beautiful she was, how talented, how lucky my parents were, and they drank it in. Conversations at dinner turned into Bree updates. Family outings revolved around her schedule. Mom spent weekends sewing costumes or chauffeuring her to rehearsals. Dad bought a high-end camera just to record her performances. I'd sit at the table, homework spread in front of me, trying to insert myself into conversations that no longer had room for me. It was gradual, like watching yourself fade from a photo. They didn't stop loving me, but they stopped noticing me, not in the ways that mattered. I still tried, I still showed up, did the dishes, brought home groceries, and left sticky notes reminding Bree about her dentist appointments. But the thanks became rarer, the warmth cooled. One day I realized I couldn't remember the last time they'd asked how my classes were going. One Christmas stands out like a bruise. I had spent weeks baking everyone's favorite cookies and wrapped them in neat little tins with handwritten notes. Bree got concert tickets, a designer bag, and a surprise trip to a weekend dance camp. I got socks and a $10 0 cents Starbucks card. I smiled, said thank you, tried to mean it. But something cracked in me that day. Still, I told myself it was fine. Being the older sibling meant being the steady one, the one who didn't need constant praise or attention, that if I just kept doing the right thing, they'd see me again. I didn't know I was already invisible. It didn't happen all at once. That's the part that makes it easy to doubt yourself. When someone starts treating you differently bit by bit, you start questioning whether you're just imagining things, maybe they're just stressed, maybe I'm reading too much into it. That's what I told myself again and again. The first red flag came the summer before college. I was sitting at the kitchen table, looking over my course schedule, when my mom sat down with a serious expression. I figured she wanted to talk about books or commuting options, but instead, she launched into this weird monologue about independence and responsibility. "You're an adult now," she said. "It's time you learn how to stand on your own." I nodded, thinking it was one of those parental speeches. But then she dropped the bomb. "We've decided not to contribute to your college expenses." Just like that. No conversation, no warning. I sat there stunned, my mouth halfway open. "Not even for books?" I asked. Dad chimed in from the living room, not even looking up from his laptop. "If you want to live here, you'll need to pay rent, and your own groceries too. That's only fair." I wanted to ask how that was fair, how Bree, who was still in high school, never had to lift a finger or pay for anything, but I bit my tongue. I didn't want to sound ungrateful. I told myself, fine, I'd manage. I had a part-time job. I could figure it out. But figuring it out meant working double shifts at the cafe and skipping meals when tips were low. It meant baking cupcakes at night for extra cash and falling asleep on my textbooks. Meanwhile, Bree got a new phone just because, and weekend shopping sprees were a regular thing. The difference in treatment wasn't just noticeable, it was suffocating. One evening, I came home exhausted, uniform stained with espresso, and walked into the living room where Bree was showing off her new AirPods. "Mom and Dad got them for me," she said, beaming. "Aren't they cute?" Asked Mom if she could help me buy my chemistry textbook for the semester. She didn't even hesitate. "You need a budget better, Lena. Bree doesn't have these kinds of expenses." I wanted to scream. Of course she didn't, because I was the one absorbing the blows of adulthood while she got to live in a bubble. Bree wasn't lazy, but she didn't have to try. Everything was handed to her, and I, apparently, had to be the sacrificial lamb for the sake of character building. Rent was due on the first of every month, and my parents treated it like a mortgage. If I was even a day late, they reminded me. I left notes on my door, sent passive-aggressive texts. Never mind that I was juggling school, 2 jobs, and still helping around the house. I once tried to talk to them about how hard it was, just asked if they could ease up on rent until the midterms passed. Dad shrugged. "Life doesn't ease up, Lena. You need to learn that." Yet somehow, life did ease up for Bree. She came home from school to have smoothies and hot lunches. She got chauffeured to her dance practices and didn't work a single shift anywhere. When she complained about being tired, they sympathized. When I fell asleep sitting up with my laptop open, they told me to manage my time better. There was no space for me to struggle, no room to admit I was overwhelmed. Every time I asked for help, I was met with either judgment or guilt tripping. "We're already letting you live here," Mom would say. Like that, made up for everything. I began to feel like a tenant in my own home, not a daughter, not even a person, just a paycheck they could squeeze for rent and someone who didn't require too much emotional maintenance. The worst part, I still tried. I still made dinner when they were tired, still offered to pick up groceries on my way back from class, still remembered birthdays and anniversaries. I was clinging to the hope that if I just kept being good, they'd start treating me like family again. But deep down, I was starting to understand that I wasn't the daughter anymore. It was a life lesson. By the time Bree was gearing up for her senior year, I'd become a ghost in my own house. I came and went without fanfare, slept in short bursts, and barely had the energy to speak at dinner. On the rare nights I even made it to the table. The imbalance had become routine by then. I accepted it like gravity. Bree was the chosen one, I was the background character. She got new clothes, spa days, and tech gadgets. I got silence and rent reminders. But nothing could have prepared me for the moment everything cracked wide open. It was late October, and the air had that crisp edge that made you want to stay in bed all day. I had just bombed a bio exam and spilled coffee on my work shirt in the same 24 hours. When I got home, Bree was in the living room, surrounded by college brochures, Pinterest boards, and a brand new laptop. I froze in the doorway. "We're helping Bree decide on a school," Mom said brightly. "It's such a big decision. We want to make sure she's fully supported." I nodded numbly. That word supported hung in the air like poison. I had applied to college completely alone, filled out FAFSA forms in my room, and researched scholarships in silence. No one had thrown me a planning session or bought me merch from campus stores. Then came the real gut punch. "We're thinking of getting her a car," Mom said. "She'll need something reliable." I couldn't stop myself. "You wouldn't even help me buy a bus pass when I started college." Mom blinked, clearly annoyed by my tone. "Lena, you're more independent. Bree needs a little extra to succeed." That was it, the phrase that snapped whatever was left of my restraint. I barely remember walking to my room. I just remember the heat in my chest and the dull ache in my teeth from clenching my jaw. I opened my laptop intending to finish an assignment, but ended up staring at the blinking cursor for 20 minutes, too angry to think. Something in me shifted that night, a quiet, sharp realization they weren't just choosing Bree, they were actively discarding me. A few nights later, I called Grandpa Joe. I don't know what pushed me to do it. Maybe it was the way Bree had waved her acceptance letter like a golden ticket, or the way Mom kept referring to our investment in Bree's future like I was some stock that had tanked. I hadn't talked to Grandpa in months. He and Grandma had been living in Arizona, enjoying retirement and desert sunsets. But he picked up on the third ring like he'd been waiting for me. "Hey, kiddo," he said, his voice warm and gravelly. "Long time no see." I told him everything. How I was drowning in bills, how Bree got everything while I scraped by, how I paid rent to live in a room covered in posters from when I was 12. He listened, really listened. Then he went quiet. "Lena," he said slowly, "didn't your parents use the money we gave them for your college?" Blinked. "What money?" Another pause. When he spoke again, his voice was colder. "When you were 16, your grandma and I gave your parents $50,000, 0 cents. It was specifically for your education. We wanted to make sure you had a good start." The room spun. "They never told me," I whispered. There was a long silence. Then, very quietly, Grandpa said, "They lied to you." I could hear him breathing deep, heavy. He was trying to stay calm, but I could tell he was furious. "That money was for you, not them. If I had known this is what they were doing." He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. I sat there in stunned silence. My throat was dry. My heart was pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. $50,000. They had it. They had it all along. While I scraped together paycheck after paycheck, while I skipped meals and took on endless shifts, they had the money. And they chose not to tell me, not to use it for me, not even to acknowledge it. I could have cried, but I didn't. I just sat there, numb, letting the betrayal settle into my bones. "I'll handle this," Grandpa said firmly. "You just focus on school. You've done more than enough." It wasn't until after we hung up that the full weight of it hit me. All those nights I asked for help and was told to budget better. All those times I was made to feel like a burden for existing. And the whole time they had the means to make it easier. They just chose not to. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to Bree laugh on FaceTime through the wall. That was the night something broke in me for good. I wish I could say I stormed into the kitchen the next morning and demanded answers. that I threw the truth in their faces and watched their guilt unravel. But real life doesn't play out like a TV drama. The truth didn't ignite me, it buried me. I floated through the days like I was underwater. Everything sounded muffled. Food had no taste. Even sunlight felt too sharp. I still woke up for school, still worked my shifts, still paid rent on time, but I was hollow, going through motions like muscle memory. At home, I avoided them as much as I could. I learned to time my kitchen visits so I wouldn't have to make eye contact. Bree was always buzzing about college, about dorm colors, meal plans, and clubs she wanted to join. I just smiled and nodded, trying to swallow the bitterness like it was medicine. It didn't help. One night, I overheard Mom on the phone with her sister. "We're so proud of Bree," she was saying. "She's going to do amazing things. Honestly, we just want to make sure she's fully supported." I was in the hallway, frozen in place. Fully supported. That phrase again. It rang like a fire alarm in my ears. I backed into my room and locked the door. It was hard to describe the kind of heartbreak I felt then. Not just the betrayal about the money, but something deeper. I felt disposable, like I'd been useful for a time, but now that they had a brighter star, they had no more space for me. I began to dissociate in class. I'd sit through lectures and retain nothing. My grades slipped. I got my first C on an essay and didn't even feel surprised. It was like a part of me had already given up. Like my body was showing what my heart already knew. I was breaking. My boss at the cafe started noticing. "You look pale," she said one day, frowning. "Are you okay?" "Just midterms," I lied. She offered me an extra shift. I took it, not because I needed the money, though I did, but because I couldn't stand being in that house any longer than necessary. The house felt like a lie. The family photos on the walls mocked me. The fridge magnets, the shared calendar with Bree's dance schedule, the quote board that said home is where the heart is, it all felt fake. I wasn't home. I was in a place that had decided I wasn't worth choosing. At night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, trying to remember the last time I felt safe there. Nothing came. One night, I had a panic attack. It started with a racing heart and a tight chest, and ended with me curled up on the bathroom floor at 3 a.m., gasping for air. No one noticed. No one came. The next morning, I made pancakes for Bree and cleaned the stove like nothing happened. I didn't tell anyone. Who would listen? My friends were sympathetic but distant. Everyone had their own problems. I didn't want to be the downer, the one who always had heavy baggage. So I turned to the only place that didn't talk back, my journal. I started writing every night, pages filled with anger, sorrow, and longing. I wrote letters I'd never send. I wrote about the version of myself I used to be, hopeful, trusting, eager to make everyone proud. And then I wrote about who I wanted to become. That's when things shifted, not dramatically, not overnight, but something inside me clicked. If no one was coming to save me, I had to save myself. I made a list, find a new job, something better than the cafe. Look for cheap rooms to rent, anything to get out. Cut expenses, cancel every non-essential. Tell grandpa everything, maybe he could help. The list became my anchor, a plan, a lifeline. Because even though I was tired, even though I was heartbroken, I wasn't done yet. They had stolen years from me, but I still had more left. And I was going to use them to rebuild no matter how long it took. That night, I stayed up late on my laptop, not to doom scroll or do homework, but to look at possibilities. Studio apartments, roommate ads, and scholarships I might still be eligible for. Most of them were out of reach, but I kept scrolling. It wasn't about finding a solution that night. It was about reminding myself that I could still look, that there was still something out there for me beyond this house, beyond this betrayal, that I still had agency. I didn't feel strong yet, not even close, but I could feel the flicker of something starting to wake up inside me. Call it anger, call it survival instinct, call it hope. Whatever it was, it said, "You're not finished. You're still here." And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to begin. The first real breath I took in months came the night I moved into Grandpa Joe's house. It was just a guest room with faded curtains and a lumpy mattress, but it felt like a palace, like safety, like someone finally said, "You've suffered enough, rest now." Grandpa didn't make a big deal out of it. He just opened the door, handed me a fresh towel, and said, "You're home now, kiddo." I wanted to cry, not because I was sad, but because I didn't have to pretend anymore. Over the next few days, I did something I hadn't done in years. I stopped bracing for impact. I wasn't walking on eggshells, waiting for rent reminders or guilt trips masked as parenting advice. For once, I could just be. I still worked, went to class, still kept to my list. But Grandpa made everything feel lighter. He asked about my assignments, left a thermos of coffee for me in the early mornings. He never asked me to prove I deserved his help. That was new. One afternoon, while we were folding bakery invoices together, he looked at me and said, "Ever thought about taking over this place one day?" I laughed, thinking he was joking, but he wasn't. "I'm serious," he said. "You've got the mind and the heart for it. And you already know the business better than half the folks who've worked here 10 years. The idea felt too big, but it rooted itself in my brain like a seed. That same week, I started reworking my class schedule. With Grandpa helping with transportation and housing, I could finally afford to take a full course load again. I even dropped a few shifts at the cafe and used that time to volunteer at the bakery, where I shadowed the operations manager and learned how to handle inventory, payroll, and vendor negotiations. It was exhausting, but in a good way. The kind of tiredness that came from building something, not just surviving it. Grandpa encouraged me to apply for a local grant for aspiring women entrepreneurs. I nearly talked myself out of it. "There's no way I'll get it," I told him. "Then we'll try again next year," he said, "but you'll never know if you don't try." He sat with me as I filled out the application, helped me tweak my personal statement, and even sent me articles about women-owned bakeries around the country. For the first time in forever, I felt like someone was investing in me, not just financially, but emotionally. I started smiling again, laughing at dumb TV shows, making weekend plans with friends I hadn't seen in months. I even brought Bree's old cake recipe book from home and started baking just for fun again. When the grant came through, $3,000 0 cents to start a small pop-up dessert business, I cried so hard I scared Grandpa. We celebrated with root beer floats and a quiet hug. I don't think I'd ever felt so validated. I used the money to launch a booth at the weekend farmers market, Lena's little oven. Just cupcakes and mini pies at first. But it took off fast. People liked the flavors, but more than that, they liked the energy. They could tell it came from someone who loved what she did. My confidence started to grow. I began raising my hand more in class, started tutoring students who struggled with food chemistry. My GPA climbed. I wasn't just getting by, I was standing tall. Then one morning, Grandpa handed me a manila folder. Inside was a binder full of bakery blueprints, vendor lists, and cost breakdowns. "I'm retiring for real next year," he said, "and if you want it, it's yours." I stared at the folder, then at him. "You trust me with all this?" "Lena," he said, "I'd trust you with my last dollar and my best sourdough recipe." That night, I called my best friend just to say, "I think I'm going to be okay," because I finally believed it. What surprised me most wasn't just how much things changed, but how quickly I started to feel like myself again. Or maybe not the old me, but a newer version, one that had been bruised, yes, but not broken. I started waking up before my alarm, not out of anxiety, but because I was excited for the day. I began sending out thank you emails to old professors who'd encouraged me in the past, just to let them know I was doing okay now. I signed up for a weekend workshop on small business branding and met other women chasing their own quiet dreams. One of them cried when I told her my story. Another offered to help me design a logo. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't dared to let myself feel: proud, not for surviving, but for rebuilding. I wasn't just trying to escape anymore. I was building something that belonged to me, something no one could take away. And that changed everything. It all unraveled faster than I expected. Grandpa didn't waste time. The day after I told him about the stolen college fund, he called my parents. I wasn't there for the conversation, but I heard the fallout. Apparently, they tried to spin it, said they redirected the money because Bree's college was more expensive. They assumed I'd be fine on my own, that I was stronger. Grandpa didn't buy it. You took what wasn't yours, he told them. You lied to your daughter, you let her suffer. They argued, blamed each other, tried to guilt him, said I was manipulating him. Grandpa stood firm. You have until the end of the year to pay it back, every cent. Or I revised the will. They thought he was bluffing. He wasn't. A few days later, I came home to find him at the kitchen table with legal paperwork. He'd already contacted the family attorney. They've got until December 31st, he said without looking up. After that, it's done. I didn't say much. I didn't need to. For once, justice was unfolding without me having to scream for it. And then came the shift. My phone lit up one night, mom calling. I let it go to voicemail, then a text. Can we talk? Followed by another. This isn't how families solve things, followed by guilt. Your sister is struggling. You don't know what this is doing to her. I stared at the screen and laughed, really laughed. After everything, they were still trying to make it about Bree. I didn't respond. Then they showed up. I was in the bakery one afternoon frosting cupcakes when Grandpa came to the back. Your parents are here, he said. Want me to handle it? Yes, I said without hesitation. He walked out front. I watched through the cracked door as they tried to plead their case. Mom was crying. Dad looked tired in a way I'd never seen. Grandpa didn't budge. She's not coming back, he said. You lost that right. Eventually, they left. It was a strange feeling watching the people who once held power over me now reduced to apologies and excuses. I didn't feel cruel. I felt free. Things got quieter after that. No more calls, no more guilt trips, just silence. But the consequences for them were loud. Word got around among family, among friends. People started asking questions. Why was Lena living with Grandpa? Why did Bree suddenly have to get a part-time job? Why had the tone at their house changed so drastically? Bree called me one night sobbing. They're cutting me off, she said. They said they can't afford to support me anymore. I stayed quiet. I have to work, Lena. I don't know how to do this. I took a breath. You'll figure it out. She sniffled. You're mad at me? I'm not, I said truthfully, but I'm also not your safety net. She didn't like that, hung up on me. I didn't call back. At the bakery, things were blooming. The pop-up was so successful that Grandpa and I expanded it to a permanent weekend stand. Then, a weekday lunch crowd. We hired 2 part-time helpers. My name started becoming known in the community. Local news came to do a story on young entrepreneurs. They featured me, my cupcakes, my story, the way I turned pain into purpose. People came in just to meet me. Some shared their own family betrayals. Others just wanted a chocolate tart. Every night, I closed the register with pride. I was earning this, building it from scratch. And then came the envelope. It arrived in early December, thick, official, with embossed lettering from Grandpa's lawyer. Inside was a letter naming me as the successor to the family bakery and executor of a new trust fund he had established in my name for expansion, investment, whatever I needed. I cried holding it, not because of the money, because someone finally saw me as worthy of a legacy. Grandpa toasted with root beer that night. To clean starts, he said, and sweeter endings. That was the moment I knew they couldn't touch me anymore. Not with guilt, not with money, not with words. I wasn't just surviving. I was winning, and I'd done it on my own terms. After that night, I noticed something else shift inside me. I no longer felt the need to prove anything to them. My parents' silence, Bree's tantrums, the whispers from extended family, it all slid off me like water because deep down, I knew I'd already won. Not just the moral victory, not even just the bakery. I'd won peace. That peace gave me room to imagine more. I started planning a second market booth across town. I sketched out a menu for seasonal flavors. I looked into renting a small commercial kitchen, maybe even hiring another young woman who needed a break the way I once did. One night over tea, Grandpa said, "You know, legacy isn't just about blood. It's about choosing who you believe in." He chose me. And for the first time in a long time, I chose me too. The past didn't vanish, the wounds didn't magically close, but I'd built something that could stand on its own, something real, something mine. That was the revenge they never saw coming. Not spite, not shouting, but thriving. And I was just getting started. By the time New Year's rolled around, my parents were ghosts of the people they used to be. They missed the repayment deadline. Grandpa didn't give them an extension. True to his word, he met with the lawyer again in early January and finalized everything. Their names were officially removed from the will. The trust was sealed. The bakery? Mine. I didn't go to the meeting. Grandpa offered to take me, but I didn't need to see it happen. I already knew how it would feel, like justice finally tipping in my favor. Fallout started quietly. At first, my cousins stopped inviting my parents to family gatherings. My aunts and uncles, who had always looked up to them as the stable ones, suddenly kept their distance. No one outright said anything, but the silence was loud. Bree tried to ride the wave like it wasn't crashing beneath her. She posted a carousel of her vision board on Instagram with captions like, "New Year, New Me," and "2025 is all about growth." In one slide, she had a blurry pic of the boutique where she worked, framed by a pink border and glittery text that read, "Girl Boss Era." But the truth seeped through in the comments. Friends asked why she was suddenly working so many hours, why she hadn't gone on the spring trip to Florida with her cheer friends. One even said, "Didn't your parents just buy you a car?" That comment disappeared within hours. Back at the bakery, things were thriving. We were featured in a Valentine's Day article for the city's top 10 date night dessert spots. I created a line of cupcakes inspired by breakup songs, bittersweet, sassy, unapologetic. They sold out every day. Customers loved the vibe. They weren't just buying cupcakes, they were buying empowerment, survival, proof that it was possible to rebuild from rock bottom with frosting and grit. Some came in crying, others laughing, a few just wanted to tell me, "Your story gave me the courage to walk away from mine." One afternoon, a woman in her 40s hugged me across the counter. "I finally told my parents I'm done supporting my brother," she whispered. "They always made excuses, but your story made me realize I wasn't crazy. Thank you." I was changing lives through sugar and truth. Meanwhile, Bree kept unraveling. She posted less, smiled less, even dyed her hair dark and captioned it, "New chapter, darker mood." I knew the signs. She was trying to transform, hoping the pain would fade with aesthetics. Then came the call. Not from her, from Mom. She left a voicemail that I listened to once, then deleted. Her voice cracked halfway through. "We messed up. We know that. But Bree is struggling. She doesn't talk to us anymore. She's failing her classes. Can't you reach out? Maybe she'll listen to you." I stared at the wall after hearing it, not because I was surprised, but because part of me still hated how easily they leaned on me when things broke. I didn't call back. Because here's the truth they never wanted to admit. You don't get to use your oldest child like a shield and then beg them to become the savior. You don't abandon someone in the storm and then ask them to pull you from the flood. Bree's consequences weren't mine to fix. The next time I saw her was purely by accident. I was restocking the bakery's side shelves during a weekend farmer's market when she passed by with a friend. She looked thinner, Tired, her clothes were still nice, but they didn't fit quite right anymore. Something about her eyes, hollow, like the glitter had been scraped out. Our eyes met. She opened her mouth like she might say something. I gave her a polite nod and turned back to my shelf. That was it. No drama, no confrontation, just silence. Later that night, Grandpa and I shared leftover brownies in the kitchen. He asked if I was okay after seeing Bree. I'm fine, I said, and I meant it. Because I was. What they did to me left scars, but it didn't ruin me. I'd found my peace, and it didn't live in their approval. It lived in the smiles of strangers biting into salted caramel, in my balance sheet turning black instead of red, in the quiet mornings before the ovens kicked on, when I stood alone in a space I'd built, breathing in the scent of cinnamon and coffee and hope. They were still stuck in their mess, but me was already baking the next chapter. I went to bed that night with the scent of warm chocolate still clinging to my hair, and before I drifted off to sleep, I smiled, because for the first time in years, I didn't dread tomorrow. There was no more waiting for someone to rescue me, no more hoping to be seen by people who'd already made up their minds. I had become my own safety net. And the sweetest part? I hadn't just survived the betrayal, I'd flipped the story. Now I was the one building something real. They were the ones watching from the outside. And that was justice baked to perfection. Some nights, when the bakery is closed and the world is quiet, I sit at the little round table in the corner and let myself remember. Not the anger, not the exhaustion, but the version of me who kept showing up, even when everything was stacked against her. I think about the girl who woke up at 6 a.m. for class, worked until midnight, and still came home to parents who acted like she was a burden. I think about the groceries she skipped, the books she couldn't afford, the tears she hid in bathroom stalls between shifts. And I want to reach back through time and whisper, hold on, you don't know it yet, but everything they made you carry is going to build something they can never take away. Because that's the truth now. They can't touch this. The bakery isn't just flour and sugar, it's proof that I didn't need to be chosen to be worthy, that being overlooked doesn't mean you're lost. It just means you have a better view of what really matters. Sometimes customers ask me if I've always loved baking. I tell them the truth. I didn't start because I loved it. I started because I had to survive. But now I do it because I believe in what it creates. Joy, comfort, a reason to keep going. I still get messages from Bree sometimes. Some are apologies, others are half accusations in disguise. You think you're better than me now, she wrote once, just because Grandpa picked you? I didn't reply, not because I'm angry, but because I don't owe her a response. Closure doesn't come from confrontation, it comes from peace. And peace is what I've built here in the early morning silence, the clatter of mixing bowls, the warmth of ovens, and new beginnings. I've started mentoring a girl from the local high school. Her name's Jada, reminds me of me, quiet, scrappy, full of questions. I let her decorate cupcakes on Saturdays. Sometimes she just comes in to sit and breathe. I get it. One day she looked at me and asked, "Do you think things get better?" I didn't hesitate. Yes, I said, but not because someone makes them better for you. You make them better. One step, one cake, one hard day at a time. She smiled. Cool. That was it. But I knew she heard me. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe I'll open a second location. Maybe I'll teach baking workshops. Maybe I'll just keep making cupcakes and giving girls like Jada a place to land. Sometimes I wonder if my parents ever walk past the bakery, if they pause on the sidewalk and peer through the window, seeing the life they thought wasn't worth investing in. Maybe they do. Maybe they don't. But it doesn't matter anymore. Because I've learned that love isn't proven by blood or titles, it's shown in actions, in who shows up when it's inconvenient, in who believes in you when there's nothing in it for them. That's what Grandpa did. That's what I try to be for others now. And every time I hand someone a warm muffin or slide a cupcake across the counter to a nervous teen with shaking hands, I think, this is it. This is the life I fought for. Not just to survive, but to turn survival into something sweet, into something that lasts,